So the last really important section that we need to talk about is conic sections. And there are 4 different kinds, and we've looked at a couple of them before, but when we talk about conics, it's when we take a plane and cut a cone, what shape we end up with. So if we cut it straight across in any location, we're going to end up with a circle. If we have it slanted, that's where our parabola comes from. If we slant it toward the end, if we slant it in the middle, it's an ellipse. So it's an oval. And if we have a vertical plane that cuts off 2 of the edges, then we have a hyperbola. Basically, it's 2 parabolas in opposite directions. So those are all of our different shapes, and we're going to talk about each one. Each one has its own special formula, shape, the way that we calculate the different parts of it. So we're going to do circles first because I think they're the easiest, and then parabolas because we've seen those the most. So when we talk about circles, this is what our equation looks like. So we know what a circle looks like. We know some of its characteristics. We've got the center. We know that all of the points on the circle are equidistant from the center, and that distance is called the radius. If you double the radius, you've got the diameter. So we've got all of that information. The standard form of an equation looks like this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Now h and k are the coordinates for the center. So we'll be able to find the center if we have it in that format. The important thing about circles is that the x squared and the y squared coefficients are the same. They have the same sign, they have the same number. There's nothing that changes. That's what keeps everything nice and equal away from that center point. So what if we wanted to try a couple of these? We're going to write the equations for these 2. So remember, this is h, this is k, and this is r. So we just need to be able to plug h, k, and r into that equation, and then we've got the equation of a circle. So if we plug those 2 in, we've got x minus 7 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 6 squared. So we could rewrite that and change 6 squared into 36. That's probably the way that you would see it written. And remember, this is the h and this is the k. Now notice when this is plugged in that h ends up x minus 7. It's the opposite of what it is in the equation. So if you were given this equation and you had to find the center and the radius from that, then you would have to use the opposite sign. So this would be positive 7 and positive 3. So there's one. Let's look at what happens if we change the sign. So this is h and this is k and there's our r. So if we plug all of these into that equation, we're going to have x. If we plugged in a negative 5 to minus h, we would have x minus a negative 5. So that's going to change the sign and make it plus 5. So just notice that from our center point to the entry that I have into my equation, the signs are the opposite. So that's not too bad to keep up with. So that's squared plus y minus 4 squared equals the square root of 2 squared. So if we wanted to rewrite that, we'd just be able to change that to a 2. So that's what it would look like. Questions so far about circles? Let's try writing one in standard form. We want to be able to find the center and the radius and graph it. Now, sometimes we have to complete the square to do this. So sometimes they don't give us something that looks all nice and neat. So for this one, we're going to have to complete the square. So that's what my equation looks like. X squared plus y squared minus 6x plus 4y minus 12 equals 0. Now I know I'm dealing with a circle because if I look at the x squared and the y squared, this is a positive 1x squared and this is a positive 1y squared. So the coefficients of both of those terms are the same. That's what makes it a circle, and that's what makes it so that I know going forward, I'm trying to get it into an equation that looks just like that x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now you guys have done complete the square before, but you may have forgotten. So we're going to put all of the x terms together, all of the y terms together, and then put the other numbers over on the other side. So we've got x squared minus 6x, and I'm going to leave a space, plus y squared plus 4y, leave a space, equals, and I need to move that 12 to the other side. So if I add the 12 over, it's going to be equals 12. Okay, now it's the complete the square part. So when we complete the square, we take whatever the coefficient of the x term is, and to find out what we need to add in here, we need to divide it by 2 and square it. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and negative 3 squared is 9, so I have to plus 9. And if I plus 9 on this side to keep everything nice and balanced, I have to plus 9 on this other side. We do the same thing for the y part. Whatever the coefficient of the y term is, to figure out what we're adding, we're going to take that number, divide it by 2, and square it. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 right here. And if I add 4 on this side, I've got to add 4 on the other side. Now, so far, it seems kind of random, but it's going to end up looking exactly the way we want it to. The first thing we need to look at is the x squared part. So x squared minus 6 plus 9. If we were to factor this, we've set this up so that it's going to work out just right. If we factor this, factors of 9 that add up to give me negative 6 are going to be negative 3 and negative 3. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So when we factor this out, we've got x minus 3 times x minus 3, which is x minus 3 squared. That's exactly the way I needed it to look. That's why we call it completing the square, because we've completed it so that when we factor it out, it ends up as being that same thing times itself, or that same thing squared. Now we do the same thing for the y value, plus. Now if we factor this out, factors of 4 that add up to give us 4 are 2 and 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. So when we use that factoring, we know how to do that. So this is going to be plus 2. Now there's a shortcut here. It's always going to be half of what that middle term was. So we just have to divide it by 2. So notice on both of these, all we had to do to find out what that factor was divide by 2 for that middle term. And then whatever's on the other side is going to be my radius squared. So 12 plus 9 plus 4 gives us 25. Now, the center, remember we have to take the opposite of what these are. So this is H and K. So the center is going to be positive 3 and negative 2. And the radius is the square root of whatever this is. So it's going to be 5. I can sketch that out. I'm going to share one I've already drawn. It's not perfect, but it'll do. So there's my center at 3, negative 2. And if we count a radius of 5, I usually just count to the left, right, up, and down 5 and try to connect it to make it look like a circle. Again, that's not a perfect circle,